Most people end up in powerful positions because they want to be powerful. They want to make decisions and flex their muscles. And I am blessed to end up in a powerful position because I want to make a difference. I want to help. And it's been far too long that women have never had these opportunities in Pennsylvania.
This is the Visible Voices podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Resa E. Lewis. In today's episode, I share my conversation with attorney, public defender, politician, and lifelong Philadelphian, Speaker Joanna E. McClinton. Madam Speaker is currently serving as the 143rd Speaker of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. Before we get started, I wanted to announce a book giveaway for this episode. So after you listen, head over to Instagram. Find me at Resa E. Lewis, MD. Please give me a follow, and in the comments to the episode, tell me what you liked about it. The book giveaway will be open for 1 week until I drop the next episode. Sometimes listeners are curious. They're like, Resa, you're a doctor. Why don't you have doctors? This is supposed to be about healthcare. But, this is healthcare, this is equity, and this is current trends. And you are just off the Democratic National Convention. Voter registration is high priority. It's back to school. From your perspective, what is the importance of civic health and a commitment to civic health?
That is a profound question. I start about immediately thinking what my longest adult caregiver used to tell me, which is, what are you doing in Harrisburg about people living in your zip code dying at early ages unnecessarily? What is your long-term plan? So when we think about civic health, it is directly connected to our physical, emotional health. And when I am in this moment in time, just a couple days out of Chicago after an exhilarating, fun, exciting, a little tiring Democratic National Convention, I am home on a mission to make sure that people know when to register, how they're able to vote, how easy it is in Pennsylvania to vote, to make sure that no matter who you're choosing by November the 5th, that you choose, that you support, that your voice is your power. Too many times we get discouraged and say, oh, shoulder shrug, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who's in charge. It doesn't matter who's in charge at the State House. It doesn't matter who's in charge of the White House. None of that affects me and my neighborhood. But the truth of the matter is, when we take a little time and engage the way my best primary care doc used to, spend a little bit of extra time just to see what's going on. What are the questions you might have forgotten because of oh boy, the doctor's here. I've been waiting, and now it's time to talk about what's going on with me. That's what I'm doing in my neighborhood, talking to my neighbors about why do we need to vote on November the 5th, and how do we get every generation excited to vote on November the 5th? Those who just came out of high school, or those who are, started college and said, oh, I wasn't able to vote the last time. How do we get them not only to pay attention and care, but to be determined to participate?
True story. I recently was attending a wedding and I was in the car with some friends, and one of the friends said, oh, I'm going to be out of the country on election day, so I'm not going to be able to vote. I'm like, no, wait a minute. Right now, let's log in. And she successfully signed up to get a mail-in ballot. I'm like, no. This is not the year to opt out. You've done a sachet. You were a lawyer. You were an assistant public defender, and the sachet I'm talking about is into politics. Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So I'm still a lawyer. I have a bar card in my wallet, not on here looking for clients, but I left the public defender's office, got a job working for my state senator as his chief counsel. It was my first time in Harrisburg, and I learned in the behind the scenes role how important the decisions made under the dome of our state capitol are, and how many people don't know, but they affect us, they impact us. And so a few years into that job, when my representative at the time for the State House retired, my senator said, Joe, you should run. And of course I said, no, thanks. But notwithstanding the initial no, eventually I did decide that I should run. And I'm so grateful that my neighbors have had me as their voice in Harrisburg for the last 9 years.
Amazing. I was going to ask for a Pennsylvania State Government 101. Can you give the audience an overview? Because this is the largest state representation in the country.
That's right. We're loud, proud, large, and full time. So we all are familiar with the governor. We see the governor on TV and on the news and on social media feeds. Our governor is Josh Shapiro. He is from Abington, Montgomery County. He's been the governor for 2 years. Our lieutenant governor is Austin Davis. He's the second in command. He's from Allegheny County. He used to be a state rep. And fun fact, our governor used to be a state rep. Underneath, we have the larger chamber, or what's considered the upper chamber. That's the state Senate. There are 50 state senators. Each of them serve about 300,000 people all across Pennsylvania. Then the lower chamber, or what we like to call the People's House, 203 of us, lots and lots and lots of us, and we all serve about 60,000 constituents. So we have our executive, that's the governor. We have the lawmakers, that's the House and the Senate. And then we, of course, have a judiciary. We have a statewide court system.
You were previously the House Majority Leader, then the House Minority Leader. Now you're Speaker, Madam Speaker. Can you tell us a little bit about that position?
So determining who will be the speaker every session, every 2 years, is which party has the majority of the seats. So in 2015, when my neighbors first sent me to Harrisburg to be their voice, there were 82 Democrats. I'm a Democrat, and there were 121 Republicans. So that could be described as a super majority. And for the next 8 years, Republicans remain in control until November of 2022. Voters across Pennsylvania elected Democrats to represent them in 102 House districts. And we have a 1 seat majority. So it's very tight every day, every time we're there voting. But it's been an exciting moment to not only shift the balance of power, but for there to finally be, after almost 250 years, a woman to lead the institution.
How did it happen? How did you get named, elected, tapped?
So first thing was in 2018, after the term ended, we had a few different retirements. We have 7 leadership spots in the state house, and we were having 3 retirements. So lots of state reps, because any one of us can be speaker, we can be leader, we can be the appropriations chair. It's a whole lot of moving around, a lot of moving parts. And once we're elected, then our colleagues elect the leadership positions. So my first leadership position my colleagues elected me to was the House Democratic Caucus Chair. That was in 2018. A woman had never done that job. A person of color had never done that job. That job simply means I ran the meetings for us to talk about bills every time we were in session. Fast forward, 2020, our leader had been in charge for about 14 years. He lost his reelection. So there was a whole lot of shuffling. Our members, my colleagues, trying to figure out who's running for leader and where can there be support. I had not been interested, but women in our caucus told me, Joanna, you're the only woman on our leadership team. If you don't run to be the leader, we will not have a woman be leader for a long time, because generally people get reelected by the members for the next few sessions. So I was fortunate to have my colleagues' support. And then in 2022, when we flipped the chamber, I ran for speaker not until February, because we had to fill 3 seats in our special elections. And after they were filled, I ran for speaker and had my colleagues' support and was elected by them February 28th, 2023 as Speaker of the House.
Yeah. Sometimes we don't see the things about us that other people see. There's something about you, obviously, that people see and people say, go for it. We want your voice. What do you think it is?
I will scratch my head all day. We don't have all day, though, to see what it is, because I'll tell you, I'm very blessed that most people end up in powerful positions because they want to be powerful. They want to make decisions and flex their muscles. And I am blessed to end up in a powerful position because I want to make a difference. I want to help. And it's been far too long that women have never had these opportunities in Pennsylvania. They have evaded us to the left, to the right, winning and losing, and just not even having enough women. But I'm so excited that I serve right now in a chamber where we have the most women on both sides of the aisle than we've ever had in our chamber's history. We have 68 women serving in the 203 body, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. You've worn other hats. We referenced a little bit being a lawyer. You're still a lawyer. You are an ordained minister, and you have a relationship with gospel music. Can you share more about these?
For sure. So I am one of those who grew up in church. We all grow up differently. Some of us have respective faiths. Some of our families don't have faith traditions. But I grew up with a strong one. Not only did I grow up going to church every single Sunday, my mother sent me to Christian school from fourth to 12th grade. And by the time ninth grade came around, I'm like, Mom, I understand the Bible. I know the verses. Please let me go to public school with my friends so I can, get out into the world. And she was almost there. It was like my first big case, but I lost it. She ended up not listening to 14-year-old me and kept me at the same school. And as a result, I honestly grew to love my faith and find my identity in my faith. And you just asked about, how did you get in a powerful position? For me, it's all rooted in faith. When I say I want to make a difference, it's because of how I perceive my faith and how it's impacted me. So as a college student, I became a youth leader, serving adolescents and children, planning programs, teaching them the Bible. And through all those experiences, I met with my pastor and said, I would like to do more. I don't want to be in charge of a church, but I definitely would like for my voice to be lent to sharing the faith and inspiring people. And so we went through classes. I've been to seminary. I'm still a couple classes short of my master's in Bible, but it's been a big part of my life.
Yeah. I really appreciate and thank you for sharing that. You've made many references to voice, and here on the Visible Voices, we speak with subject matter experts and amplify those voices. Now, you don't need this podcast and me to amplify your voice. You are amplifying your voice. And this is my question I ask my guests. When did you realize you had a voice, and when did you start using that voice? I find sometimes those two time periods differ.
Absolutely. So for me, it has to go back to my days in public defense. When you are in a courtroom, and often, for those who aren't aware, in Philly at least, it probably isn't the same everywhere, but in Philly, a judge will hear all the private counsel first because they have to get to other courtrooms. And then the judge looks around and is left with this young lawyer who's a public defender and 10 to 20 more cases. And you're standing there and you are the one to advocate on behalf of someone. And you also are the one to kind of move the process, but not take away from that person's moment to seek justice as well. Many times we think justice only happens on the opposite side, but I learned that, our system that's supposed to mete out justice isn't always fair. So I found my voice in my early lawyering days of public defense.
Yeah. Did you know that you had a voice before that?
I was not as vocal. I am still not an outgoing person. People are shocked, but I'm like, no, I'm the true definition of ambivert, a true introvert with some extrovert qualities. But I was shocked because I could be very content, not being at the forefront, not standing up, speaking and making arguments. But I was determined not only to represent my clients, but I thought every time I'm in this courtroom, I get to tear down those stereotypes about public defenders being unprepared and being insignificant and not making a difference. I was doing every case like Johnny Cochran.
You spoke about adolescents and students. It's back to school. So what is something that is top of mind for you as we're going into an election year, voter registration, and back to school?
Safety. That's the number one thing, is safety. Not just telling our children to have a safe school year, but modeling for them the behavior that they can take inside the classroom when they meet aggression, when they meet opposition. I was in 12th grade when Columbine happened, and I always thought, well, they're going to do something. They meaning, the people in charge, the folks who can stop guns from coming into any community and prevent children at school from coming under fire. But unfortunately, as we've seen in the 26 years that have passed, nothing significant has been done. So I also lend my voice advocating for safety in the state capitol, because more must be done to protect our children from, the one person who decides this is a good day to do something crazy. And then also from other children who are bullying, who are harassing, pushing and shoving and trying to get on Instagram, not for politics and not for government, but, for fighting and being mean. And we know that some of those things lead to more violence. So that is what's top of mind for me. I've been having a couple of events in the community to just reinforce the message of peace, to let people know you've got caring adults all over. You have your parents, you have your family, but you have other people who are rooting for you and cheering you on.
Yeah, civic health is health. And what I hear you just touch upon is gun violence prevention and also Suicide Awareness Month. We're actually about to enter Suicide Awareness Month. We're coming off gun violence prevention. Can you go a little bit more granular with both of those and sort of this safety highlight?
Absolutely. So many people don't know when we think about gun violence in Pennsylvania, the face of it, you think, oh, it's urban crime and whatever comes to your mind with urban crime. But sadly, the leading death for young white men throughout Pennsylvania, especially in rural communities, is death by suicide. It is rampant. It's high rates. We sent a bill over to the state Senate and we hope that they'll take it up this fall. It's called a red flag law. So if someone's experiencing depression or other types of situations, they can just alert the local authority and say, hey, my roommate, my fiance, my husband, my girlfriend isn't doing great. Can you come and remove temporarily firearms? Because we don't want people to die by that way. And when you read more about it, because I am not a medical doctor, I learn as I read and study that sometimes it's moments of just brief ideations of, I don't belong, I shouldn't be here. And it just takes people and they succumb to it. And we are now calling it death by suicide. But the more we can do to make sure that there are less arms available, and the more we can do to take down the stereotypes about mental health and saying that our young people, oh, it's in your head, you're fine. Children are not fine. I didn't grow up with social media. Thank goodness. Children have a lot more stress. They have a lot more pressure and they can't escape the bad moments at school like I did. Once I got in the house, it was over. Now it's replayed on all sorts of apps. It's embarrassing. So we have to take the time to not just make sure we get our physicals, but that those we interact with on a regular basis are emotionally healthy because we don't want anyone to die by suicide.
Yeah. I also subscribe to this very broad definition of health. It is bodily health, mental health, community health, social health, financial health, civic health. So I want to circle back to civic health and voter registration and this as one of your priorities.
Yes, so it is very important that people participate because it is so easy to say, oh, I'm going to be in a wedding overseas, I can't do it. Or, oh, I meant to go, but I ended up having to work all day. Someone else went and picked my kids up, so I couldn't do it. I didn't get out of the babysitter in time. We have to plan to participate. The truth of the matter is, 7 out of 10 times what's happening in Washington may not impact us. 5 out of 10 times, so half, it may not impact us what's happening in Harrisburg. But when we think about the priorities that we share for safe communities, for even having the right to vote, there are those in this age who would take that away. And we don't want to sit by idly and explain to the next 3 generations what happened. I have so much pride when I think about my mom growing up in the 60s. My grandmom did not let her do the sit-ins in segregated North Carolina, but I know she was on the right side of the issues. And I know that she was rooting for everything to pass. And they know that they marched with pride when they could finally vote because they couldn't. When Black women could not vote in segregated North Carolina. So now I've got to be ready in 40 years to say, oh, in 2024, this is what I did to ensure that we had civic health all throughout my community because there were some waiting in the wing to take away our rights. And I wasn't going to stand by and let that happen.
You and I are both here in Philadelphia, and yet what happens in Philadelphia is not necessarily representative of the state. This is a huge state. Correct me if I'm wrong, 75% of the state is rural.
That's
what
correct.
What other demographics or, aspects of Pennsylvania do you think might be a little lost on audience members who are mostly in cities or in suburbs of cities?
Yeah, so when we are in a metropolitan, we're just kind of around each other. But it's until you get on the Turnpike or the Northeast Extension, and it doesn't take long, but it takes at least 30 minutes before you start to only see farms for the next few hours. But, 30 minutes outside of Montco or the Chester, either direction, outside of Bucks, you just will see farms and farms and farms. And in between, you'll pass, Harrisburg, you'll pass Pittsburgh. But the truth of the matter is, our state is rural. And when you look at elections, it's mostly red and then they're blue dots. Those blue dots are the suburbs and the cities. And we have just a larger population. When you think about where do people live in Pennsylvania, more than half of the state is on the other side of Harrisburg. And the state is huge. Like our state is enormous. It takes you 10 hours to go from Philly to Erie if you're taking all the breaks. It won't take 10, it's 7. I've done it. But seriously, like our state is huge, but most of the population lives on this state, lives in those suburbs you're referencing, lives in the city of Philly. So if we are able to participate in the same way people in rural communities participate, we can determine who is representing us in the United States Senate, who is representing us in the White House, because it's just more people. It's not that our votes count more, no, but we do have more of the population on the side, and we are able to activate and say, hey, this is the direction we want to go, and we have the power, and it's very exciting to know that we all participate. But some of us are just, taller, and I'm only 5'3", so we're tall in civic engagement. We're not tall physically.
Connecting some of the dots of information you shared, is that why Pennsylvania is so crucial and important when it comes to a presidential election?
Absolutely. And it's why it's a swing state. It's why, we had a Republican governor elected in 2012 and then a Democratic governor elected 4 years later. It's why in 2016, Hillary lost to our former President Trump. But in 2020, our president at the time, President Joe Biden, defeated Trump. I mean, it flips back and forth. It is the true definition of a purple state. Many times you say, oh, well, Texas is always red or New York is always blue. New Jersey is always blue. Well, Pennsylvania is a large state. We have a lot of electoral votes, and it can swing back and forth depending upon where people turn out and who they're turning out for.
Yeah, say more about electoral votes and representation in the House of Pennsylvania and sort of where we can do better, because I know we can do better in terms of having more people at the table.
Oh, yeah. So we have 21. We are down to 19. We had 21, but we lost a congressional seat. And that is because people relocate. People go to our great schools and some of them decide to live in other places. I was recently at a company in Philly and they said they're losing people to Charlotte. Folks want to live a different type of life, a different pace, different communities. So when we think about representation and how people live, we talked a little bit about metropolitans. So some are in the suburbs, some are in the cities, but if almost half of our population's on the other side of Harrisburg and in our pocket of Chester, Bucks, Montgomery, Delaware, and Philly, we have a lot of muscle to say, this is the way we want Pennsylvania to go for the state house, for the White House, and every single office in between. We're electing this year an auditor general. We're electing this year a state treasurer. And like I said, our votes don't count more. We just end up, because of where people live in Pennsylvania, having more vote on this side and more of a vote share and more voters. So we really can help tip the scales one direction or the other.
How is our representation in state government regarding women, regarding age, regarding stage, regarding socioeconomics? And I ask because I was speaking with a Rhode Island state senator, and he was saying, Resa, I grew up poor, and none of my colleagues know anybody poor. So sure, maybe we have some women and men now at the table, maybe different backgrounds, but socioeconomically, we don't have representation. And I just use that as an example. Like, what is our current representation and where would you like to see things change?
So one of the big things that people always talk about is, why do politicians in Harrisburg have the ability for folks to talk to them over dinners or take them on a trip to see things? And I always tell them that I'm like your friend. I grew up not in deep poverty. I don't want to be extremist at all, but I'll just say, meager, humble beginnings, and my mom worked so hard. So that's why I'm like, I don't want to extreme, but we didn't go to the mall. I went to King of Prussia Mall when I was a law student. I had never been because there was no mall money. So we went to Ross, Burlington Coat Factory, and Goodwill and got what we needed from there. Hand-me-downs were very regular in my household, but we want to have an environment where not only can people from all backgrounds be able to run, but also be able to get there and learn and be educated. If everyone had to be a lawyer or a medical doctor, that would be prohibitive because what small percentage of our population have these advanced degrees? And we've just gotten our medical doctor. We just elected our first Indian American. We just elected our first Pakistani American. We just elected our first woman who's from the Dominican Republic. We are adding diversity in Pennsylvania State House. We elected our first woman of a color who's a part of the LGBTQ community. And it's awesome to have more voices with different backgrounds because what we bring to the decision-making table is our lives and people who've had similar lives. So you started off talking about how for so long men were in charge. Men of a certain background, men of a certain history, because they say that men politicians pick men to replace them. So that being said, we are now seeing it tip the scales, being able to have more representation and most importantly, a job that people can actually have. Because if everybody has to be rich to be a state rep, then it's never going to work. So folks say, you all should be part-time. It's like, well, some people, this is their life's work. They don't do it for their whole life, but they should be able to tell their families, I can get groceries and I can pay half of the mortgage.
100%. Listeners and viewers, I'll say, often don't understand completely Philly love and what it is about Philadelphia. So what would be your description of why Philly and why the Philly love that we all have?
Oh, yeah. So having lived nowhere else my entire life, I'm not biased. 42 years in a city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. It's something about this city that has community, respect, grit, determination, and most importantly, a warmth that you don't find in other mid-Atlantic northern cities. You can be lost in other big cities. I won't say which one, Manhattan, and nobody will even speak to you. Like people will not even stop as you're like, can you tell me where the metro stop is? You can be in Philadelphia and you will get complete SEPTA instructions. You will get to know where's Chestnut Street, where's Arch, where's this, where's the other. And it's just such a different vibe. And I love it here because it is a big city, but it feels like a small town. And people who've been here for even only a little bit, they know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. So we're also all very interconnected.
Your legacy and what keeps you up at night.
There are serious problems that concern me. And when I think about all the bills that we were able to get to the governor's desk in my first term as speaker, I also realize, it's going back to the gun violence conversation, that there are laws that we need to change that we've sent over to our state Senate that haven't moved out. So those are the types of things that keep me up at night. When will we build the consensus and get out of our own way? Because any entity can tell us, oh, you all are going too far. But the truth of the matter is, when we look at numbers, when we look at the people that are being lost in different communities, we must build the muscle and the political will to do something. So that is what keeps me up at night. And in terms of legacy, it's holding the door open for so many more women to be able to not just do this job, but to go even higher. You know, one day we'll look up, Pennsylvania will have a woman governor, a woman in the United States Senate. It won't be strange because other states have had these, but we've been behind the times in PA.
The Resa wrap-up. Special thanks to Speaker McClinton for joining me in conversation. Just off the Democratic National Convention, right amidst the back-to-school period, and deep in the presidential election time. Listeners, I wanted to share a little fact. The Speaker of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives is the oldest statewide elected office in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Since its first session under the frame of government in 1682, yes, that's 1682, which was presided over by William Penn, over 130 House members have been elevated to the Speaker's chair. The House cannot hold an official session in the absence of the Speaker or their designated Speaker pro tempore. In other words, Madam Speaker, Joanna E. McClinton is a visible voice. That's all I have for you this week, audience. See you next time. The Visible Voices podcast amplifies voices in the healthcare, equity, and current trends spaces. We are a production of the People's Media Network. Our team includes Dr. Giuliano DePortu and me, Dr. Resa E. Lewis. Please find me through my website and on social media, Resa E. Lewis, MD, or through the podcast, thevisiblevoicespodcast.com. Please give us a 5-star rating on Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, please be sure to share the show with a friend. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinion of the institution with which they are affiliated or identified. Information herein should never be used as a substitute for clinical judgment or for medical advice.